to watch your son die and get beat to death over and over and over. But I knew I couldn't live with myself nonetheless. I did everything I possibly could for him. And as part of the evidence against Joe Wolf, I discovered on that video and presented it to the DA. And today, yesterday he was indicted, charged, and he'll appear in court November 2nd, and then he'll join the other two November 30th. So it's worked really well for me so far.
My name is Gustavo Arellano. I'm the editor of the OC Weekly. The OC Weekly is the alternative newspaper here in Orange County. We have a philosophy that we comfort the afflicted and we afflict the comfortable. And this is key to remember, especially with the case of Kelly Thomas, because what Ron didn't say was that when Kelly Thomas, when it was announced that police officers had beat a homeless man into a coma, all the news outlets, and I have to say, unfortunately, us included, we just reported what the PIO said. There was an altercation. We have police officers who are injured because of this man. End of story. We immediately knew, though, we were immediately suspicious that something was going on because the Fullerton Police Department, so it's only the second worst police department in Orange County. The worst one's Huntington Beach. That's a whole other story, though. But we knew that there was years and years of strange deaths, horrible beatings, just embarrassing things going on with the Fullerton Police Department, but we didn't know how to tackle it because we were short-staffed. Our main reporter was actually working on another story, so we were we reported that, but we figured there has to be something else there. There has to be something else there. Then Friends for Fullerton's Future, which is this great muckraking blog, absolutely amazing blog, they published a photo of Kelly's purple, destroyed face. This is what the Fullerton Police Department had done to him. And no other news outlets were publishing it. And we actually, I don't know why we had this debate. For, us reporters at the time were like, we need to publish this. We need to show the world what's going on. Our editor was hemming and hawing, and finally we published it. So we were the first major media outlet to publish it. And then after that, of course, it somehow became acceptable to be able to publish that image. And that's what really took the story to go viral. And it was great to see everyone, especially on social media, just passing it along, story after story after story. And there were all these other developments, but really the main people, the best reporting on this has been Friends for Fullerton's Future. OC Weekly, we don't even compare to it, I'd say would be number 2. Friends for Fullerton's Future by far beat everyone and anyone. And how did they do it? They didn't do it, none of them were trained reporters. Tony Bushala is a developer who is a nice guy. No, he's a friend of mine, but sorry, I'm not going to go down that alley. But his contributors, none of them are reporters, but yet they had this passion and they had video cameras and they had this ability with Facebook and Twitter and all that to be able to immediately do story and get it out there. What we have that they didn't have was institutional knowledge of what was going on in Fullerton and this whole career. Although Tony's a lifelong resident of Fullerton, we as reporters, we have been covering police brutality in Fullerton since the beginning. In fact, our second ever cover story was called Fullerton Metal Jacket. Back in 1995, it dealt with the police chief at the time, Pat McKinley, who ended up being a city council member, who ended up getting recalled, and just his atrocious way of handling, essentially what happened, there was an illegal immigrant who got shot to death when a bullet he was at an AA meeting, and a bullet just went into the AA meeting and killed them. Pat McKinley marches into the barrio in Fullerton and treats them, all of them, as being the assailants. So we knew that there was something going on. So December of last year, the very first story that I did as the edited was a story called The Bullies in Blue. The cover was just a fist and a cap, a police cap with the Fullerton Police Department there. And we gave the whole story, the history of the Fullerton Police Department over the past 20-some years. That story went viral as well. Basically, we knew that this was Kelly's murder was not an isolated incident. This was just one in a long, long list. The difference, though, was that it was captured on camera. The difference, though, that it was blogs that picked it up and posted that. Without that, everyone would have believed what the Fullerton Police Department said at the time. So in that sense, social media is incredibly important nowadays to communicate your story, especially when it comes to protests, and especially with Kelly's Army, a lot of their organizing. There was a Facebook event page. Let's protest outside the Fullerton police station. How big was the largest protest against largest rally?
I don't know, there could have been 600 people out there at any one time.
600 people, hundreds of people for weekly at a time. All this organized by social media. These were organizers doing it, from Kelly's Army, doing it at the time. So that was been the big story in Orange County in terms of police brutality, in the past 14 months. The second story happened this past summer in Anaheim, in my hometown, it was two shooting deaths. It was two shooting deaths. One was Manuel Diaz. Manuel Diaz was hanging around, unmarked car, police car comes up, rolls up against him. Diaz starts running. This is on a Saturday afternoon in broad daylight. He runs. Police shoot him once in the leg, and then they shoot him again in the head. Police officers say he reached for his waistband. He reached into his waistband, so of course that gives him justification to shoot, but he was unarmed. At this time, there was dozens of families, kids out there just hanging out. This is a neighborhood that, in Anaheim, I know this neighborhood very well because I used to live nearby it. So this was a place that was always dealing with police officers just messing with them, just rolling up to any kid and saying, hey, let me pat you down. So there was a lot of rage going on there. And so finally, there was protests once the police came on the scene to do their investigation. People in the crowd, they started throwing bottles at them, plastic bottles. Police officers say rocks as well. By that time, cameras were there, video cameras were there, and so they shot what happened next, which was the Anaheim Police Department shooting pepper balls and rubber bullets into the crowd. A K-9 unit jumping loose, knocking over a baby in a stroller, like gnawing into a guy's hand. Immediately, that went viral. That's Saturday afternoon. Saturday night in that neighborhood, there starts to be fires. People started rolling out dumpsters into the middle streets, lighting them on fire. The following day, another officer-involved killing. This time was Joel Acevedo. Police officers saw a stolen car. They chased after him. The car came to a stop. Everyone scatters. Joel Acevedo, according to the Anaheim police, pulled out a gun, started shooting at them. Anaheim police shot him to death as well. A second night of protest. That wasn't full-scale riots. They were just burning dumpsters and what have you. At that point, that day on Sunday night, that happened at 1 a.m. in the morning, the shooting at the Acevedo. I was just about to go to bed when my reporter, Amber Stevens, she said, I hear there's another officer-involved shooting. I'm like, oh my God, go out on the scene, go get it. So we didn't go to sleep until 5 a.m. in the morning. At that point, we had, we were updating on our blog, we're updating the story, but also just putting stuff out on Twitter, on Facebook, just, the readers are just coming in. Even though it's 4 a.m. in the morning, people know this is a story that's developing right there, right then. Those are 2 days. Then 2 days later, Anaheim City Council, it's the first council meeting. Chambers hold probably 200 people, over 1,000 people showed up, 1,000 people, angry people. Now you have people from Occupy movement, now you have all sorts of people coming from across Southern California, if not the country, and a riot breaks out right in front of Anaheim City Hall. Windows get smashed, newspaper boxes get burned, and then of course in the middle of all this, while the police department's clashing with the protesters, the Disneyland fireworks start blowing up. That was the greatest moment in Orange County history. Absolutely was. Now, our approach as a newspaper, we could have just continued to update our post. But really quickly on, I said, no, right now it's coming live. We're just going to do our whole story on Twitter. Every once in a while we'll put it on Facebook, we'll gather everything later on, but right now it's happening live as we speak. I don't have time for my reporters to just sit back and think about it all, just go out and do it. I couldn't go to this protest because I had to put away the paper. We were editing Tuesdays when we put all of our stories together. I had to stay there, but I had four reporters on the scene, and all of them were photographers. We're a staff of about 11. We're a tiny paper. I even had my food critic there, and it was just, and then my web editor. We were both in the office, so I would tweet, I would retweet whatever I saw, and we We dominated that coverage all the way through. Then, after all that was said and done, we figured, okay, we still believe in print. We have a print product to do, so let's give the perspective. Because same thing with Anaheim, this wasn't an isolated incident. There's been about, I lose track, unfortunately, 7 or 8 officer-involved shootings in Anaheim over the past 9 years or so. One of them involved an African-American man named Julian Alexander. He heard a noise in his backyard. He goes outside with a broomstick, gets shot and killed by the police officer who was in his backyard. But of course, the officer was found not guilty of anything. So we put that into perspective. Of course, the big story that the media picked up was, oh my God, there's poverty in Anaheim. Oh my God, there's 4 Mexicans in Anaheim, in Disneyland. And so everyone came in, and at the same time, the background to this, the ACLU had filed a lawsuit to try to get district or ward elections in Anaheim for the city council instead of at large, because again, they were saying, oh, Anaheim has little representation. And we knew, we have that institutional knowledge, and we put it. That ACLU lawsuit, although its intents are good, its execution isn't good at all, so we reported that. And not only that, this wasn't the first time there was this huge riot in Anaheim before. In 1978, there was something called the Little People's Park riot, right down the street from right down the street from City Hall. So we did a whole cover story on that. So when you cover social movements, it's very important to dominate social media. It's very, and while we're doing it, we're posting pictures for all these stories. We had slideshows. That's important. People want information. People want instantaneous information. You have to be on top of that. But at the same time, readers also want perspective. Readers want that institutional knowledge that will be able to set everything up so it all makes sense, or it becomes more damning. So when it came to Kelly's murder, again, it wasn't an isolated incident. This was just finally the police department got caught. And that, which makes the past that much more infuriating, but at least people know, when people say, well, it's just police officers doing their job, okay, maybe if it's one isolated death, that doesn't excuse it, but it makes, accidents happen. But if you have a pattern going back decades, it's a problem. And eventually, because of all that reporting, the police chief went down, 3 of the council members went down. Things happened because people quickly realized that this wasn't isolated. Same thing with what's happening in Anaheim. This isn't just one isolated moment, or 2, one day after another, but this is a pattern that's been going on for years. And readers really want to value that. Readers need that knowledge. Readers need that voice to be able to set it into place. And yeah, that's that. So we want to cut off our comments short, or we're done with our spiel because we want to get to any questions you folks may have. And direct it to anyone involved.
Yeah, initially there was a report that at least 2 cameras were confiscated from citizens, but I never heard anything after that.
In the Anaheim protest, I
forgot the Kelly Thomas.
Oh, the Kelly Thomas. Ron can answer that.
Yeah, worse than that, and it's actually caught on a different camera, where they took this lady's film, took it right out. Of course, the officer denied it. There's a lot of incidents in there of false reporting in this. And yeah, they did. They took it
There's
away.
video of the cops show it. How come that emerged?
We still have 2 trials to go. Not everything can come out. You didn't hear that, Steve. No, but it's true, not all evidence is presented yet. An awful lot of it is. 2 trials haven't even started yet. So, yes.
Ron, did you get advice from other parents of people who've been killed by the police? Like, I live in the area, there's the Oscar Grant incident, of course, which is weird. That went viral too, obviously. Did you get any pointers from them?
Yeah, I really wish that I had. I was glad to do so. I can't say 100, but I've had so many people come up because of the success that we've had here. And I say we, I didn't do this all by myself. I've been a pain in their backside, but I haven't done it all by myself. Have come up and asked me for advice because their child or spouse or loved one was killed by the police. And I do whatever I can for them. Yes, Davis? Yes, sir.
So how did your experience in law enforcement sort of change how you approached or saw the situation?
You know, I've talked with many folks about this. My background, it seems like it was tailor-made for this. My military background, my investigative background, I'm a martial arts master. I've taught for years arrest control techniques to law enforcement. I mean, just on and on and on. So when I went in and demanded a meeting with the chief of police, I went in to the office, and him and a captain invited me in, and I closed the door, and I said, have a seat in their own office. Yeah, and that's how I handled it from there, because it was nothing they were going to BS me on, nothing. And I let them know straight out my background. So let me tell you something about myself before you start. I said bullshitting me. Before you start bullshitting me, let me tell you something about myself. And they clammed up at that point. They knew I had them. There was nothing, no road they could go down and trying to pass up on me. It wasn't going to work.
Could you both talk of,
Yes.
Gustavo, the citizens of Old Town Anaheim and the downtown central district, those who are attempting to, how do I want to say, rebuild that area, were very upset with the riots, and their response was to blame the rioters as for everything that was going on, as opposed to the police who shot the guys. Response.
Sure, there were, it was interesting to see the reaction from Anaheim City Fathers and also the police department. They all said, this didn't happen. This wasn't Anaheim people doing it. These were outsiders. There's nothing wrong happening in the city. Again, that institutional knowledge. I did a story years ago about a citrus strike that happened in Orange County in 1936. Now you're asking, what on earth can the history, something that happened 77 years ago do with police riots today? What happened then was it started in Anaheim. You had 2,000 Mexican citrus workers going on strike, and the sheriff at the time, he said, it's not our Mexicans who are doing this, it's outsiders, it's these agitators. So, our response was like, Anaheim, this just shows how endemic the problem is. There's this colonial mentality with the city fathers, with the well-to-do folks saying like, oh yeah, those Mexicans, they're in their neighborhoods, they have their problems, but they're nice people. They're not our types of Mexicans. They would never protest at the same time. So it's preposterous because you saw those people, especially me, myself being born and raised in Anaheim, I actually wrote an op-ed for the Weekly. We never do op-eds. We always do just straightforward investigative reporting, but I just got so sick of it, especially the city council's response. And also, full disclosure, my sister works for the city of Anaheim. So I try not to cover Anaheim because I know anything that I could do would mess with her. So and I announced that, I'm like, you know what, this is it. Like, screw this. You people are, fiddling while the city of Anaheim burns. I've seen just the anger in Anaheim itself just rise to a boil, and this was just what set it off. There was another protest a week after the initial uprising. It was going to be outside the Anaheim police station. There was going to be another march and so forth. I really thought the city was going to burn. My friends, we really thought it was going to happen. And the police department, they were set up. They set up in a big park. They had this whole command unit. They had about 7 agencies, and they also had 2 gourmet food trucks to feed everyone as well. Yeah, and that was social media. One of our blogger in Orange County got that picture and sent it to me. So which ones?
Bacon truck.
Bacon Mania, yeah, pigs, perfect. You can't make that stuff up. Bacon Mania truck, Bacon Mania. But so the reaction of residents, you can be as mad as you want, but again, if you're just a reporter, taking these things from residents or police officers, and you don't question it, then you're basically going to report their propaganda. But if you actually know your communities that you're covering and you see also what's going on in the streets, you'll be able to inform people much, much better.
My point was, I wasn't talking about the politicians, the usual hacks. I'm talking about the liberals who have moved into gentrified.
In Anaheim's case, I don't think that's the best condemnation of liberals. The best condemnation of liberals actually happened in Fullerton, where you have, and Fullerton's this interesting city where you have basically, the Republican Guard, then, the progressive wing. And when it came to the murder of Kelly Thomas, both of them were silent. The Republicans, they always have to support police, but the Democrats, at the same time, they did not want to join into Kelly's army. They did not want to condemn those Fullerton police officers. They did not want to do any of that. And the most disgusting moment of this all, you had all these protests for Kelly's army. You never saw these, poobahs of progressivism from Fullerton showing up to these protests or these rallies for Kelly. But when a proposal at the Fullerton City Council came to examine whether they should just disband the police department, outsource everything to the sheriff's department, when that came about, all of a sudden all these liberals came with t-shirts that say, "We love Fullerton police." It was disgusting. It was absolutely disgusting. And so it's very telling that the only, the people who made the movement, the Friends for Fullerton's Future, they're conservatives / libertarians, but they savaged both sides. And same thing at the Weekly, we would be more, wacko libertarian anarchists. And so we were able to attack both sides as well. And gentrification in Anaheim, real gentrification is up in Anaheim Hills. And that Collin area, somewhat. Gentlemen right there.
First of all, I want to congratulate you on your perseverance.
Thank
It's
you.
a great job. It's just coincidental that I come from Chicago, the city that brought you Al Capone, and the best police department money can buy. And not too long ago, maybe 20 years ago, a man named John Conway, an investigative reporter from the Chicago Reader, which is one of our newspapers, wrote a story called The House of Screams. It was a 20,000-word story in 1979 that told about the brutality of the police in areas 2 and 3 of Chicago, where the district attorney would come to the police headquarters, and in the basement they would use electrical appliances to make primarily African Americans confess to crimes. John Conroy is being honored by us at our Chicago Journalist Association dinner this coming Friday night, for his perseverance and for telling his story without YouTube. At that particular time, he spent 19 years continually attacking Commander John Burge. John Burge, as a result of the media and result of his efforts, Commander John Burge was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison several months ago. So perseverance is very important. The media is very important in getting the story out. And we're sort of proud that, like next Friday night, we're giving him this award as our Chicago Journalist of the Year. So again, media plays a big role in making sure that the brutality by any police department is not acceptable.